speaker allows us, for our faculty, affiliated faculty to the Institute, this is Nelson in Sociology, to bring collaborators in other countries in Latin America. The Institute of Latin American Studies, better known as LILAS, because of Mrs. Teresa Lozano Long, who endowed us, Teresa Lozano Long Institute of Latin American Studies, is an interdisciplinary program. We are a program, we give degrees, bachelor's, MAs, and PhDs, but we're also a resource center. We offer resources to you, for you to go abroad and study less commonly taught languages, for instance, the FLAS. You can talk to Edith Flores about that. Later on, you can grab things here, you know. You can also talk to Aaron Musi, who is the grant specialist, and we are so happy to have you here. It's very hard to come up the hill, and it's far away, but the good advantage is you exercise, and then you're gonna have a very nice view. So with less, you know, and please come. This is Paloma. Paloma leads all the scholarly events in LILAS, and we want to hear you about your interest in Latin America, but also in U.S.-Latin American relations, particularly border relations. We are in Texas, and Texas is also Latin America, it's also Mexican, it's also Peruvian, it's also Guatemalan, it's also all the countries in Latin America, because we have generations of Latin Americans coming here. So my colleague Nelson is going to introduce Víctor Zúñiga. Thank you so much.
I'm Nestor Rodriguez, and I'm here with the privilege to introduce our presenter, Dr. Víctor Zúñiga. He's a professor of sociology at the Faculty of Law and Criminology of the Universidad Autónoma de Nuevo León. He served previously as professor of sociology at Tecnológico de Monterrey. He earned his doctorate from the Université de Paris in Vincent, France. Está en francés. I only took one semester of French, so give me a break. He has been received recognition for the high merits obtained in the development of social research in Monterrey at the Universidad Autónoma de Nuevo León in the 60th anniversary jubilee. Dr. Zúñiga is a recognized scholar of international migration and human rights, educational inclusion and exclusion, and border studies. He's a prolific writer, well over 100 publications. His most recent publications include The Sources of Sociology, published in Brussels, with co-authors. He has also edited a volume called, I'll read in Spanish, Lo que los maestros mexicanos conviene que conozcan sobre la educación en Estados Unidos. What Mexican teachers should understand about education in the United States. More recently, we both had a chapter published in a binational study done on migration between Mexico and the U.S. Looking at about 20 years of migration. And Dr. Zúñiga's chapter in that book, which came out last year, published by Springer Press, is called Educating Across Borders: The Well-Being of Students from Mexican Immigrant Families in the United States and in Mexico. The title of the volume is Migration Between Mexico and the United States. Many important works have been produced by Dr. Zúñiga's research. And in walking over here up the hill, I was thinking that when it comes to knowledge about Mexican immigrant children who are taken to Mexico by families who were born in Mexico or who were born here, who went to school over there, that perhaps as much as half of all that knowledge is somehow related to the research that Dr. Zúñiga has done. Thank you very much.
So I'm really honored to be here as a speaker in LILAS, and I wanted to say thank you, Adela, for your welcome, and I am very glad to have scholars I admire among you, among this audience. Nestor Rodriguez, first of all, and Emilio Zamora, Luis Urrieta, Ángela Valenzuela. All of them are American scholars, Mexican-American scholars, who are part of my readings in Mexico. All of my students we used to read them with a lot of passion, and they discuss a lot of things about history, educational policies, and sociology of the border, etc. So I'm very glad and honored. I'm going to present a lot of aspects, I think. However, I'm just going to respond 4 questions in my presentation. The first thing is advertising, because the presentation I'm going to share with you is part of a book that will be published by the University of California Press in January 2024. If someone is interested in this kind of issues, please buy the book. Please.
Read will buy the book.
Read and buy the book, yes. As an introduction, let me tell you that this research about immigrant children or children of immigrants didn't start in Mexico. We began in Georgia, United States, no Georgia, the Soviet Union. Georgia, United States, in the northern part of the state, very close to Tennessee, because very important presence of Mexicans and Central Americans in that part of the state. A dramatic increase of immigrants coming to that part of the state, and I don't have the time to discuss with you why in Georgia and in this part of Georgia. It will take a lot of time to explain our presence in Georgia, and instead of talking about the 0.5 generation, I'm going to talk about the Georgia project that lasts at least 10 years. We were working in this part of the United States for 10 years. I'm talking all the time as we instead of I, because all this is part of work of a team. It's not only a team, Mexican team, a binational team. Not only a binational team, but also an interdisciplinary team. We are demographers, we are anthropologists, sociologists, people coming from political sciences, demography. There are a lot of demographers working with us. It is a team where different institutions of Mexican institutions are participating, have been participating during 25 years, and at least 7, 8 U.S. institutions like University of Nebraska, UCLA, the University of New York, etc. So binational, interinstitutional, interdisciplinary project during 25 years. We started in 1997, before you were born, I think so. And other aspect as an introductory words is that, as you can imagine, we have a lot of products today from this project, and I just wanted to highlight one of those products that is the PhD dissertation. We have until today 6 PhD dissertations using these databases and interviews, etc. And the other aspect I wanted to emphasize is why we started this project in the schools of Georgia, in northern part of Georgia. Because when we discussed it with the principals, we were working in schools. The arena, the most important arenas we were working in was the schools. Why the schools? Because the dramatic demographic transformation changed all the schools. In a part of the United States where English learners didn't exist at that time. All the students at that time spoke English. In 2 years, I was witness of this. In 2 years, some of the schools changed demographically from 0% of English learners to 40% of the students as English learners. And in that part of Georgia, nobody knows what Spanish is. It's a region of the United States where immigration was zero at that time. So it's a very different thing. If you're thinking in Texas, nothing to do. It's a very different different society, even if this is the United States, different society. So principals used to tell us how do you think about they continue saying Hispanic students. For me, it was a little bit strange because they were immigrant children or children of immigrants, and for them was Hispanic. Okay, what do you think about Hispanic students? And the principals used to respond, they disappear. So Ted Hammer and I, one day we were joking, they disappeared. Maybe it is not they vanished. I hope they don't vanish. They are in another part of the United States, or in Mexico probably, or in Guatemala. So we started the project. We started the project in Mexico because we were in Georgia in 2004. In 2004, we began is Ted Hammond, Ruben Hernández-León, Silvia Gorgiuli, and others. We started in 2004 in Nuevo León, and the disappeared students appeared. They were there. So that's the starting point of the project. The starting point is those students exist, but however they are in other parts of the world. That's it. Let me use a little bit, even probably 1 minute for this, because it's a very important part of the story. One day I had the opportunity to go to a school in county of North Carolina. It was, for me, a wonderful opportunity because for me it was the first time in a school in North Carolina. And I had a short conversation with the principal, a young woman, very smart and they welcome a Mexican researcher very well, etc. And in a moment of at the time of our conversation, I told her, some of your students that are Mexicans or children of Mexicans. It's one part of the North Carolina where they produce all the turkeys you can imagine. Turkeys, and you love turkeys, so they produce turkeys. And the people who are working in this county are most from one region of Mexico, that is Veracruz. And they are working there in the turkey plants, of course. And that's why the reason that in that schools they experience the dramatic transformation also in the enrollment, the school enrollment. And I said to the principal, probably some of the students that are in your school this year, they will be in Mexico next year. And she said, yeah. That will be that you are going to keep in mind that happened. And immediately in a system you have in the American schools, I don't remember the name, she took a microphone and everybody understands what she wanted to say. And I remember very well the sentence that she used. Please take into consideration that it is forbidden to prohibit speaking Spanish in this school. It is forbidden. It is forbidden prohibiting speaking Spanish in this school because they are going to go to Mexico. They need to be bilingual. That's it. That's the project. I'm going to respond to 4 questions. I'm going to address 4 questions. The first one is, why are children participating in the U.S.-Mexico migratory movement? Why? This is the historical perspective. The second question is, how are children explaining their moves from the U.S. to Mexico? Children's voices. It will be absolutely absurd to have a presentation about children, and we don't want to hear what children said. We are going to listen a little bit what they said. And then the third question is, how many children have moved from the U.S. to Mexico? Demographics is important, and they are a lot. And finally, the last question is, how we built the category of 0.5 generation. That is the theoretical journey we had during 25 years. So, the first one, why are they participating? And I like very much this figure. I like very much this figure because I did it, of course. That's important. And the second thing is, instead of talking about the number of Mexican-born people living in the U.S., we can see the percentage of the total population of Mexican in Mexico living at that moment in the U.S. territory. Percentage. And you can see that during this period, 1870 to 1980, the percentage of Mexican-born people living in the U.S., it was very little. That means the great circulation. This is the period, the great circulation. Ruben Hernández-León and I insist very much that the scholars chronicling the migration between Mexico and the United States, Mexico, use the decisions of power for making periods. Erica period, and I don't know what period, and I don't know what period. Instead of taking into account the strategies of migrants. The most important strategy in this case is to circulate. Circulation is possible because, was possible because the border was permeable. With a border having permeability of the border, people can circulate. And what was the participation of children at that period? They left behind. They knew that their father, their siblings, or adult siblings, were working in the U.S. for 4, 5, 6 months, and they will return. And I made 2 surveys for having for collecting the aspirations of children that were children of those migrant circulating, and most of them responded to the survey. I'm preparing myself for migrating also. That's like migration was migration to the United States was something like part of the life. Okay. In some regions of Mexico, of course, migratory tradition in Mexico are clearly are regional phenomenon, no national phenomenon. Okay. The other period is this one, the Great Migration. That's incredible because at that moment, in 2005, 12% of the total population of Mexican-born were living, 12% was living in this country. It was incredible because the rest of the story, you can see 1%, 0.5%, 0.1%. Why we have this? It is like paradoxical. So, like in this case, this is a decision of the Senate in the United States. And the decision was to seal the border, to impede crossing the border, to militarize the border, so they produce a perverse effect because they wanted to seal the border, but migrants cross the border. Once they cross, they stay, instead of continue circulating, they stay, and once they stay, they want to reunite their families. It means that la casa dividida became una nueva casa in the United States. This is that explains this. But however, you can see the proportion of Mexican-born are decreasing since 2005 until today. Today we have only 8.7% of the population living in the United States, and at that time was 12.5. Why? Because we have another period that Ruben and I decided to coin as a Great Expulsion. The Great Expulsion is not only the decision of the machine of deportation. Yes, it is a machine of deportation, the product of the result of the machine of deportation, because instead of controlling the border, what they decided, the government in the United States and the federal government and state governments and local governments also, what they decided is to put the border inside the territory. Inside, instead of in the border. They are taking and producing fear in different parts of the United States. However, this is only part of the story. The other part of the story is the family strategies, because family strategy is important in this case. What they are doing, Mexican families and Central American families, also Guatemalan families, Salvadorian families, Honduran families, what they are doing is to reunite in their countries of origin. And it's like, I like to say that it is like a defensive strategy. Instead of being deported, instead of being victims of anti-immigrant atmosphere, we are going to move to live in our country of origin. The thing is that a lot of children were born in the United States. They are reuniting in Mexico or Guatemala, but the children were born in this country. And they arrived for the first time to Mexico for the first time. They are not returnees. They are international migrants moving from one country to another country as part of the being together as family strategy. Being together as family strategy. So finish this part. I hope I will have time to share with you for responding to the second question. How children explain their moves from the United States to Mexico? Well, I just want to tell you that we have a lot of information about it, a lot of information. You can imagine 75,000 students we surveyed during this time. 75,000 students have been surveyed, and we interviewed almost 200 students in different parts of Mexico, transnational students, because they were in the United States and at that time they were in Mexico. 200 interviews means 1,000 pages of transcription. With that information, we can say something interesting, that some of the kids told us, why you moved from the United States to Mexico, and they responded, it was planned. About 7%, we circulate every day, every year, every year. This is not a problem. 6%, yes, 6% told us it's something related with the school. Very often they used to respond, my parents wanted I learn Spanish. So I'm going to spend some time in Mexico for improving my Spanish. That's it. And that is the question, the most important is almost 40% responded, we are here because of my family. Telling it more time, my family is not the love of my family. Sometimes they are in Mexico because parents got divorced. Sometimes they are in Mexico because grandparents and parents have a lot of troubles. Sometimes they lost their mother in the United States and they decided to go to Zacatecas or Guanajuato, where their parents are living there. Sometimes it's a family duties. It's very often this kind of response. We are here because my grandmother was ill. And we wanted to be with her for the last years of her life. And of course, we have another answers. And one of the answer I wanted to emphasize is there are some of the children that they disagree. I don't want to come to Mexico. I don't want to come to Mexico. And my father decided to do that. Yes, children are active. They take decisions. They decided to go or to return. Yesterday in my class, we have a guest scholar that presented the evolution of 10 years of those children who moved from the United States to Mexico. It's a long-standing research, 10 years. She began when the children were 12, 13, and now they are not children. They are 22, 23 years old, 24. And one of them, his name is Beto, was born in Morelos, and when he was very, very young, he migrated without documents to California, and then it happened something very bad to his parents, because someone stole the cell phone to his mother, and the people who stole the cell phone was members of a gang. One of the thieves were to prison, and the others decided to go to see Beto's parents, and told them, we are going to kill your son. No, so it was Santana, California. They took everything in one day, and Beto, they said to Beto, because Beto was 12 years old, Beto, we are going to visit your grandma. But the visit of the grandma, 2 years, 4 years, visiting my grandma is a little bit stupid. And he decided, I'm going to return to California. I am Californian. I am going to keep my English. Even if he was living in a very, very small town. Very, very small town. And now he's in Santana, California again. It's incredible. So, they take decisions. But two more questions. That's good. How many children have moved from the U.S. to Mexico? In the first indicator we have, the first one is children born in the U.S. This is an information the Mexican census has very well, because in the Mexican census they ask the question in which country people living in this house were born. And the United States, so we have about 130,000 children born in the U.S. in 1990. And then you see that almost 250,000, sorry, almost. In 2010, almost 600,000 born in the US, and it's about the same. Some of these children probably are the same in this case. If they continue living in Mexico, they probably are in the same category, born in the US. They are children, 0 to 17. In the census, they said, yes, my son was born in the US, my son is 16 years old. In this case, he is not a minor. He arrived to the adulthood. And this is not in this case. This is not in this case. 0 to 17. So more than 500,000, more than 550,000 minors born in the U.S. are living in Mexico. And then, problem we have is that the other part of the information is missing. Those who were born in Mexico and then moved to the United States and then returned to Mexico. The Mexican census is not a reliable source of data, because the question in the questionnaire in the Mexican census is a little bit strange. Not a little bit, a lot of really strange. There are someone in this house that were living in the United States 5 years before. No, they respond, no. The question, which is the country of birth of people living in the house is very clear. The other question is not clear. So you can imagine 500 minors in the US born living in Mexico, while only 9,000 minors born in Mexico, then in the United States, and now in Mexico. It is not true. You can see our surveys. For example, one of the surveys in Jalisco. The question is, you were born. The first question was, you spent some time of your life in the United States. Yes. In which country you were born? Mexico. Obviously, she returned because of her life in the United States. She was born in Mexico, so she returned. How many years, etc., etc. So 50% of the sample was born in the US, and 50% of the sample was born in Mexico. My idea is, I have no evidence of this, my idea is if we have 500,000 children born in the United States living in Mexico, we have about 500,000 kids who were born in Mexico, stay for sometimes in the United States, and they return. The final question, how we build this category, 0.5 generation. Let me tell you a little bit how we arrived because it was a journey. It's an inductive approach all the time. Listening to children, listening parents also at the parents, and listening at the children especially. And the first thing we had was taking into consideration two conceptual components, assimilation component and mobility component. And Ted Hammond proposes that international child migrants be defined as sojourners' children. Sojourner is the opposite of settler. For Ted Hammond, it was very important the distinction, because for teachers, it was very important to say they are sojourners. You are preparing students to live in another country. You are not preparing students to live in this city. They are going to be, they are mobile students. Schools are a very strange institution, because schools are located in a territory and serving a community. And teachers cannot imagine I'm serving a binational community. That's a very important thing we are doing today, to talk with Mexican teachers and to talk with Californian teachers, of course, Californian teachers and Mexican teachers, to tell them there are students we share. There are students that are now in the U.S. schools and tomorrow in the Mexican schools. And then probably they are going to be again in U.S. schools. So please take into account they are sojourners, they are moving, they are circulating, they are mobile students, internationally mobile students. So that is the first. We were in Georgia when we were discussing our first concept, the concept of multi-location. They are multi-local students. They are literate in reading different contexts. They have some competencies that are extraordinary, because they are able to read different contexts and different languages and different contexts. Is not Mexico, the U.S. That's obvious. Or the U.S., Mexico. That's obvious. No, it's Brooklyn and Atlisco, Puebla. Brooklyn and Atlisco, Puebla. You can imagine the difference. Or Atlisco, Puebla, probably Atlisco is 15.
It's already more.
15,000 people.
I think more.
More?
I think now it's like probably 100,000.
1,000?
Yeah.
However,
100,000, I think.
However, 1,000
100,000.
and New York.
Oh, yeah. And it's still Atlisco.
Yes. So that's the difference in terms of context. They are moving on. And the second, multilocal is that Smith and Guarnizo called the new transnational working class. That's it. Or transnationalism from below. That's it. The second concept we to present is fragmented socialization. Fragmented socialization, I'm going to read it because it's probably the best way to communicate. We also discovered that children often live apart from their parents for short or long periods of time. Some child migrants were living in Mexico with their grandparents, aunts, and uncles. Other children had lived in the United States with only one parent, while the other was absent. In short, all of this led us to discover that the notion of dislocation didn't encompass all these children's experiences. In effort to fully capture what the children were going through, we coined the term fragmented socialization. Fragmented socialization it not only speaks to the migrant children's geography dislocation, but their fractured school and family trajectories. Or to put it differently, geographic dislocations almost always involve institutional and symbolic fractures. However, I have to say, this is important to clarify that fragmented socialization doesn't equate to truncated socialization. International child migrants are not mutilated human beings. They are children who learn how to negotiate different adult worlds. All these worlds are equally legitimate. Equally. Families, schools in the US, teachers in the US, schools in Mexico, and teachers in Mexico. All of them are legitimate for children. These children are much more than bilingual individuals. Some of them are binational individuals because they have the right to be US citizens and Mexican citizens because they were born in the United States and now they are in Mexico. And one of the parents are Mexican. At least 57% of them have the right to double nationality. And they are so bilingual in different levels, degrees, bilingual, binational, some of them, a lot of them, and they are becoming little by little as bicultural individuals. This is the first time in the history of both countries that American citizens are in the schools of Mexico. And they will be really familiar with what Mexican society is. And they are moving, probably, they will be moving, probably, very likely, from Mexico to the US because they are US citizens. And they will continue circulating because they can work here and have a house there, a business there, and working here. They are bilingual, and most importantly, they are bicultural. I like to define biculturally capacity in these terms. Who is really a bicultural person? It's a person who feels he or she is at home in that country. And when she or he arrives in the other country, he feels he is at home also. I'm here in the United States now for a while, but I don't feel I'm at home. I feel I'm a foreign person.
Come on, you gotta
Come on, I'm home with you. There are a lot of questions in my mind because I don't understand a lot of things. I speak English, that's all. The difference is to feel comfortable everyday life. So that acquiring bicultural competencies is very hard, and we need to start this in an early age, not when we are adults. I think I'm finishing because the third element, conceptual element, I'm going to skip it because it's very long to explain that. What are transnational students? It will be probably the issue of another speech. And I'm going finally to talk about the fourth stage of our theoretical journey, the 0.5 generation, the labels second generation, and 1.5 generation lack empirical validity once children arrive in Mexico. Those US born are considered members of the second generation in the United States, but not in Mexico. Those born in Mexico are members of the 1.5 generation, but only while living in the United States. Back in Mexico, this category is invalid. The children residing in Mexico are international migrants in every sense of the term. And they migrate during their childhood and adolescence. Once in Mexico, to which generation do they belong? The expression 0.5 encompasses both of the mobility of these children and the fact that they are belong to a generation of migrants which has not been previously conceptualized in the literature. The category of 0.5 contains two important characteristics. The first one is represented by the 0, which indicates that these children, once they arrive in Mexico, have to start practically from 0. Let me tell you a very short story. One of the kids we interviewed in 2013, her name in our publication is Lulu. Lulu arrived to Morelos. She was born in California for the first time in Morelos, and she was enrolled to the secondary school there. Is seventh grade in Zacatepec, Morelos. And one of the first things they had to do in the classroom was to respond a test about the history of Mexico, of course. And the test had a different drawing with different persons, heroes of Mexico, something like that. And the question was, what the teacher asked them to do is to put the name of the hero. And for Lulu, it was impossible. They didn't know what the kind of people are. However, she had a very good idea. She said, I know this one, and I know this one. The first she knew was Cuauhtémoc, but she wrote Indian. And the second one was Hernán Cortés, and she wrote British. All time we remember this story, we laughed a lot because it was incredible to see that Hernán Cortés was a British and Cuauhtémoc was an Indian. Today Lulu is our friend because she is 23 years old, I think so. We remember that fragmented. That's what I say. They have to start from 0, practically from 0. And the second unique characteristic is represented by the 0.5. This is suggestive of an embryonic state, something that it is in gestation, and those still unknown. The embryonic gestal, the concept of 0.5 generation, that's what Walding wrote 3 years ago. The concept of 0.5 generation is a brilliant innovation and one that should become part of the migration toolkit. It makes visible the otherwise invisible by extending the lens to encompass both societies of immigration and immigration. In a sense, doing so is an indictment of mainstream migration studies, as it has conveniently allowed itself to forget about the hundreds of thousands of children who are Americans in every sense of the word, but have returned to their parents' home country either as a result of the deportation or because conditions in the United States have become unlivable for their parents. So thank you very much. We have time for some questions.
I have a question. Victor, I have a question. Thank you so much for the talk. It was super interesting. Thinking about the point 5 as kind of like the category that addresses all the liminality within migration, the idea of flux of change or something that cannot completely be predicted. I was thinking about the categorization in terms of like class. What happens, like looking at the answers of the children, you had the percentages, and some of the questions kind of suggested that some of these kids were upper middle class, or that they would go back to their countries because the parents were doing a PhD or they were learning English or Spanish. What happened with the category of class in the sense of is social fragmentation or fragmented socialization, when is it a plus if those class play a role for it? That's one question. The other question has to do with language. And when we think about Hispanic, like this category that is problematic, thinking about the multilingual environment of countries like Mexico or Guatemala, where you have now the phenomena of children who don't speak Spanish, and they come speaking an indigenous languages, and they go from the indigenous language to English and vice versa. So I wonder how, in this approach, the categories of class and language were taken into consideration.
Thank you very much, Adela, for the questions are very important. The first one is easy to respond because the majority of these families belong to the working class people. They are working class people. They are not middle class. If they are middle class, they have no problems. They adapt very well, returning to Mexico, and sometimes, very often, they return to Mexico because they have better conditions of living in Mexico than the United States. They are doctors, they are lawyers, they are politicians, they are professors, so we are talking about people belonging to working class classes. The second is more difficult to respond because this is a big question. This is a big question because very often those kids belonging to 0.5 generation read in English, write in English, but they speak Spanish, but they don't read Spanish. And teachers in Mexico are so stupid in terms of Spanish is very easy to read. Very easy to read. Everybody can read. No problem. So we have some strategies in the training programs with teachers with text in English, and we invite teachers, please read it. I can read it. Why you cannot read? You are illiterate? No, I read in Spanish. That's exactly the same for your student. Exactly the same. However, Spanish, we write Spanish as we speak. Yes, really. The age. Why do you why do you write H? Nobody pronounce it. Why QU for queso and I don't know, a lot of differences between the writing and the oral, in Spanish and in English and in every language. So it's a pedagogical fight we have in Mexico. And the other side in the United States, I don't want to talk about what the schools are doing in the United States of people, for students speaking Spanish in their home, because authorities like Angela Valenzuela, who probably can talk a little bit much better than me about how they are erasing the linguistic abilities in a lot of schools in the United States.
I noticed you didn't have